Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us. David Louis Rwongoya, the Secretary General for the National Unity Platform Party, is already here, and also the founding Chief Executive Officer for the Agency for Transformation, that is Mr. Morrison Rakakamba. He's already here to talk about what is happening within the National Unity Platform. Is it under siege or simply being persecuted? Very good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning to you.
Let me start with you, Mr. Rwongoya. Is NUP under siege or simply being persecuted?
A very good morning to the viewers, and I wouldn't say that NUP is currently under siege. Certainly our officers were under siege for a very long time, as you know, and the Honorable Kyagulanyi is home. Even now, if you go there, you'll find operatives all over his home and security vehicles parked near our head offices. But NUP is certainly being persecuted left, right and center. We continue to see a lot of persecution in every sense of the word. Right from, you saw what we were trying to do with the Supreme Court and how our petition was handled. We continue to get our people being abducted day in, day out. Our comrade Chairman Nyanzi was attacked just 2 days ago, and every day we receive reports of people being taken away in Ibanda. The other day they abducted someone from a place called Sheshe in Rukunjiri. Across the country, NUP people continue to be abducted, taken away in Mukono and other places across the country.
And the president has not even been sworn in. Do you anticipate that the situation might get worse after he's sworn in May 12th?
First of all, what they are doing is illegal. It's illegal. I wouldn't want to predict what more illegality they will do, because what they are doing is illegal, is uncouth and certainly uncalled for in 2021. Yeah, you saw yesterday, for example, a councillor called James Mubiru, who has been missing for over a week. He was eventually brought to a military court yesterday, the General Court Martial. They had even started moving, a word that probably he was dead, because one of the tools these people use is intimidation. So they start calling family members to say, oh, your loved one, you want them to get out of politics. If they don't, they will probably be killed. So the laws of this country are clear. Under our constitution, is supposed to be produced before a court of law within 48 hours. What happens now, they just arrest you if you're NUP, take you to whatever torture chambers they take you to. Some are taken to Mbuya, others are taken to Kalangala, others are taken to Nakasongola. People have come up, have told us really, really horrifying stories. And eventually, like in the case of Mubiru, because there was some bit of public pressure and because we knew him, there are many others who we don't even know who are arrested and taken away. So eventually he was brought to court yesterday, and after spending 8 days under illegal detention, they bring you to a military court, and the military court charges you with whatever. If you see these young people at Chitalia and other places, they tell you that when they were arrested, they are not even putting on a beret. But once you're arrested, you're taken to a certain room, they force you to put on a red beret, to put up your fist, and to say some words while you're being recorded.
You're telling me that these people are framed at the prison itself?
Certainly. First of all, it's not illegal to even put on a red beret. In our view, it's certainly not illegal. But because they want to justify bringing you to the under the purview of the military courts, which is in itself illegal and unconstitutional, but they have to make sure that they have a case which links you to the military. Because the civil courts have been giving bail to our people. And that is why they are now resorting to the military court, which they know is under command. If you read the EPDF Act, it is the president who convenes that General Court Martial. And so it's not a court in the right sense of the word, because it's under the direction and control of someone else. And yet our constitution says for the civil courts, the judiciary is not under the control or direction of anybody.
Is it true that 40% majority of the prisoners at Chitalia are NUP supporters?
Certainly. We were there yesterday with Honorable Kyagulanyi and Comrade Joel and others to check on our people. And if you talk to the inmates, they tell you every single day they bring more people, NUP supporters. And according to the estimates, over 90% of the people are actual NUP supporters there. Of course, the authorities will not agree to that. But you see, no one is ever charged with an offense of belonging to NUP. They just get some funny cases, bogus charges on you, but which are related to NUP. For example, the ones they like are inciting violence, putting on military attire, idle and disorderly. So those kinds of things, they just charge these people with all sorts of things, take them to Chitaria and remand them. Some of them have been remanded and have not faced a judge or even gone back to the court martial for 3 months, 4 months. They're just taken and locked up there. And no one knows what is happening.
Morrison Rakakamba, are such factors and incidents justified under a multi-party dispensation like Uganda?
Well, I think first of all, it is important to acknowledge that we participated in elections. A winner was declared. The court process has been concluded in spite of the circumstances. And I think Ugandans are looking forward to a swearing in and a dispensation of 5 years under the national resistance movement. So I think that is the starting point, that Ugandans participated in electing their leaders. I think over 50, if you will, NUP MPs, elected. You have a parliament that
60.
Majority are members of the national resistance movement. But then there is the People Progressive Party, I think, also got one, which I think is very interesting. And then people elected President Museveni with the Kyagulanyi bagging around 35%. So my view is that the country should really move on and start really tackling the hard issues of the day. One, for me, of the key issues that we should be looking at is how do we get vaccines, for example, jabs, into the arms of the people, the teachers, such that schools can open again, such that our elders who are more vulnerable to COVID can be able to see and talk to their neighbors, can hug their grandchildren.
Vaccinations are already here. They started. 19,000 people have been vaccinated.
Yes, that's why I'm saying that what we should be focused on as a country is how do we make sure that these jabs. But having said that, we cannot push under the carpet. This is what brings me to the circumstances that my brother and Comrade Rubongwe is talking about. I'm saying such kind of incidents shouldn't be happening. We should be focused, on the vaccines, on getting kids back to school, and other issues.
So government should not focus on abductions, arresting of individuals incommunicado.
I think you should listen a bit.
That's what you're saying.
So the point I'm trying to make is that elections were held. We should be able to move on. But
by saying we should be able to move on, Morrison Rakakamba, it's like you're saying there will be no other election.
No,
what happened in 2021, Morrison Rakakamba, happened in 2016. It happened in 2011. It happened in 2006. It happened in 2001. So we are talking about a bad precedent not coming again in 2026.
Because the point I'm making...
Brushing off what happened in this election under the guise of let's move on, let's get vaccinated. It doesn't take away the bad things.
No, I think you misunderstand. I think you're deliberately misunderstanding my point.
Go ahead, Morrison.
And this point is that participating in politics is not criminal. Protesting peacefully is not criminal. But also elements of criminality, also they need to be handled for us to continue enjoying a peaceful and a greater society that our country, which is a country under God, that has come to be. So, if some members of the public, whether they are NUP or NRM or DP supporters, are engaged in criminality, that won't stop, the police and others responsible for law and order really to get into action. But I think what David Rubongwe is presenting, it's like a targeted persecution, of a political party. That is what he's mentioning. But I think the president released what he called a major doctrine and wrote to the military and the police against torture. And he says torture is an unproductive way of actually getting information that can stand in a prosecutorial standard, in a court. The president has said that. And he wrote a major article, if you will, some 1 or 2 weeks ago, trying to state that the army is not ideologically oriented to pursue actions, you know, of torture, you know, of miming, because he talked about the old armies that used to rape, that used to loot, that used to kill extrajudicially.
Means arms.
And said that whereas there could be some mistakes conducted by people who have not been briefed fairly, you know, in tackling and trying to get confessions such that they can have a genuine, you know, case in court, that those are bad apples, and he has already directed that those apples need to be, you know, uprooted. But also, you know, NUP have also, how have they acted, I think, you know, in these circumstances? The first thing I have to say is that no Ugandan, whether NUP, whether NRM, should be, you know, held incommunicado. No Ugandan should be held without trial. But I think also the communication and engagement around NUP, you know, also is a bit suspicious. Like the case of this James Mubiru from Rubaga North that my brother Bonge was talking about. If you go to NUP members' sites and everything, he was dead. You know, so I think NUP also tried to create a situation that every person who is arrested, you know, whether legally or with mistakes, that they end up dead. But is that the case? Like that James Mubiru, you know, if you look, they even held a vigil, and it was being used really as propaganda, if you will. Then the man showed up. Whether he was presented in the right court or not, that's a matter of law that I cannot, you know, comfortably speak on. But the man showed up and rose, and really rose from the dead, if you will.
Meaning without a vigil, he would have never showed
but
up.
Then
it was a kind of a pressure tactic.
So the point I'm trying to make is what NUP is trying to tell the country and say is that every person or every individual who is arrested, you know, turns up dead. And as you know, there are also examples of really, I think, deep fake propaganda that NUP must also come and confess that it engaged in and really spoiled the image of the country. Like there are those torture victims that showed up on NUP handles, the hand of the president of NUP, who was a major candidate, and other NUP members, that showed, you know, torture and all this, and these images were shared across the world. And it turned out that this was not the case.
Like which ones?
Yes, there is this person who had the issues of, you know, wounds, I think from Bare, caused by some other situations. You can always respond to that. And then NUP was saying it is their supporter. There were also photographs, you know, I hear from Angola, from, you know, during the time of Savimbi and some other places in South America that were choreographed. I think NUP had like a factory, if you will. So I think all these mistakes, you know, that are, you know, present, you know, in our view, as a country, we need to reflect. That is why I've always argued that I think we need another group, perhaps of religious leaders. That's why I've always talked about interreligious council, although now I have concerns because some of their members participated in partisan politics openly. But a group that is above partisanship, that would interrogate some of these issues and advise our political actors and guide the citizens such that we can hold this country that we all love together.
David Louis Rubongoya, Morrison Rakakamba has chosen to focus on the issues that seem like propaganda and not the actual cases where people were actually rounded up and arrested. Is the NUP party running a propaganda messaging mission to incite people in Uganda?
Well, first and foremost, I think Morrison tried from the start to divert this conversation to say that we should be talking about COVID jabs and that kind of thing. That's what you see after every stolen election. Every dictator after stealing an election is desperate for the people to look out from that and move on.
Justification.
They just want this to be done and you know, to be done with, and then that's why you've been seeing the message coming out from them is the election is done, let people go back to their work. But there's a reason why we went to this election. We did not go into this election to have Honorable Chagulanyi in State House, just that. That was not our objective. Our objective in going into an election was to improve the lives of our people. You're telling people to go to work when actually the levels of unemployment are just skyrocketing. The levels of corruption are skyrocketing. The Auditor General's report was out recently. You saw how COVID funds were mismanaged and all that kind of thing. So when you tell us to leave politics, time for politics is over, let's go back to our work, you are really undermining the very reason why we have politics and why we have governance questions and that kind of thing. But beyond that, I really think that, and my brother Morrison is certainly knows what the law says, and Ugandans should be treated in the basic, their basic rights must be respected. And if we call ourselves a civilized society, I mean, regardless of what offense you have against someone, that is why we have non-derogable rights. And one of the non-derogable rights is freedom from torture. Ugandans are being tortured. People are being held without trial. You know, I mean, and it is outrageous, to say the least. Now, this talk of propaganda and all that, of course, is diversionary. And I'll tell you something. If the people had not started, you know, announcing Mobilu as dead because of the call which the mother apparently
so
got.
So it was a pressure tactic.
I'm not sure it was a pressure tactic. The mother said she received a call, and she was very clear at that vigil. She received a call which said, your son is dead. But what we've seen is that every time these people have our people and keep them, every time people come up and talk more about that particular individual on social media and all that, that is when the state produces them. There are people who have been dropped in Buama. Someone is taken away for 3 months, 4 months, and all of a sudden they are dumped somewhere in a swamp. And Morrison wants to say that we should move out from those issues.
But David Louis Ruwongoya, is it reflective of a true dictatorship where you abduct someone and you release them then?
But of course, you know the objective. You see, most of the people who were arrested were very instrumental in the election that we are going to have.
But you understand what I'm trying to say? During the Amin regime, if you're abducted, you never appear. During the Obote regime, you never appear. No, but you've seen individuals being held and then released at the same time.
Dictators use different tactics, but that does not make sure that does not mean that there are no dictatorships. They use different tactics.
So what are we seeing right now? What is playing out?
And for me, I want to say that even during Amin, by the way, there are people who were abducted and released after interrogation, and we have that on record. But for example, right now we have thousands of people who are missing. We cannot account for some of them. We don't know whether they are alive or dead. We have a person, for example, called John Bosco Chibarama, who has been missing for 2 years, for over 2 years now. We cannot tell whether he's alive up to now. If the family comes out and says, you know, this person is dead, you won't blame them, because they are a person who was an NUP people power at the time. He was a people power coordinator. He was abducted, never to be seen again. And that has happened with regard to many people, to many other people. So I don't think it's proper for us to say that under Amin people are disappearing and appearing dead and that kind of thing. You saw one of the people was arrested in Mukono, a young man called Semakula. He was found dead. The body was picked up from a swamp. NUP also, he was arrested with many people. If you've been seeing the statements which have been coming out of these people who have had at press conferences, some of them who were released after being grossly tortured, came out to say that some of the people they were with were badly beaten to a point of, to the point that those people were removed from the cells where they were and never to be seen again. So we don't know if those people are there, if they are, I mean, if they are alive or dead or something like that. But for me, the most important thing is that we have a constitution in this country, we have laws in this country, which command that once you are arrested, be produced in court within 48 hours. Now, it can therefore not be an arrest. It is an abduction. You're just
I've been held for more than 5 days before, and then I had to record a statement after the 5th day. So being held more than 48 hours is more of a tradition here in Uganda. David Louis Ruwongoya.
And that is what qualifies us to be a dictatorship, because a dictatorship is a system which does not have regard for the law, does not have regard for human rights, which really treats citizens. And I wanted to say that the objective, why they were arresting most of these people and now dumping them in places, because these people were going to play a fundamental role in the election. Some of them were agents. Some of the people were arrested with appointment letters for polling agents. Some were arrested while transporting materials, voting materials and that kind of thing. Honorable Chagulanyi's entire campaign team was picked up in Kalangala, first charged with spreading COVID. And if Morrison doesn't know this fact, these people were arrested on the 30th, and eventually they were taken to the court martial and charged with an offense which they apparently committed on the 3rd of January in Kavule.
4 bullets.
That they were found with 4 bullets The 49 of them were found with 4 bullets at the time when
It
they were
was a very
under detention
confusing
already.
case.
At the time when they were already under detention. So honestly speaking, I think we must be honest to ourselves and say that our country needs redemption.
The government has a list of missing people that are less than 200.
Yeah.
You have a list of more than 400 people. Have you looked at the list that is with police to ascertain whether or not your people allied to the NUP party are there?
But we released the figures, and only 89 of the people we had on our list were on government's list. The others were not, and the ones we had, or the ones we have, are many, many more. And if you see the people who have been dropped in Buama, in Mukono, in other places, you'll notice that most of these people are actually not on the government list. So these are people, and some of them, it is very disturbing, some of them have come up with really, really severe marks of torture. One of them lost an eye. Others have their manhood has been crushed. Others, you know, have burns all over the body, their bodies. And you wonder, and these people tell you that they are taken through these ordeals under interrogation.
Morrison Rakakamba, you wanted to make a submission, and when you hear him speak, do you feel like he's just spilling propaganda or there is some truth to it?
No, the point I'm making is that no Ugandan, whether NUP or NRM, FDC or somebody who is unaffiliated, should undergo torture. And I think the president released you know, a doctrine. And if there are mistakes happening, I think the system must look into these things. And the president said he has put up a commission to actually do those internal investigations. And I think the country should look forward to a report.
That's another issue I'm going to talk to you about after you exhaust that point.
That should really be
whether or not President
on.
Museveni ever knows of these operations taking center stage.
Yeah, but because you see, I also think that from NUP's perspective, as a country, we should have a genuine conversation.
Indeed.
You know, about these matters. The president talks about insurrection tendencies, if you will, like what happened at Capitol Hill in the United States. And he
January
quotes,
6th.
Yes, and he quotes some evidence of also how NUP supporters acted, whether their actions were sanctioned by the leaders or not. But at least their leaders did not come out strongly
But
condemn.
we should agree that the
strongly
issue
condemn
that
some of that
Capitol
behavior.
Hill is different from what is happening in Uganda. Robert Chagulanyi has not told any of his legislators or people, supporters, to attack Parliament. That's what happened in Capitol Hill. Yes, Donald Trump told his supporters, let's attack Capitol Hill, which doubles as their parliament, the Senate and Congress. Here we haven't seen a politician say, let's attack Parliament because of ABCD.
So to conclude my point,
go ahead.
To conclude my point is that we saw very appalling pictures.
Indeed.
Where we lost lives, and may their soul rest in eternal peace. You remember what happened here in Kampala during when Honorable Chagulanyi was arrested.
November
but
18th.
We saw appalling also, photographs and pictures and videos of NUP red berets, if you will, with a hammer, hitting a policewoman. We saw people putting on yellow, who are NRM also being undressed. So if you are pursuing an agenda of peaceful coexistence, certainly I do agree that you can be a leader of a movement or a political party, but somehow you don't have control over the actions of your supporters. But you can come out as a leader and say, as NUP, we don't condone violence of any form. We are peaceful, and if we are to protest, we protest peacefully, and rain on your supporters, such that if some of your members are arrested in form of criminality, then it's not a liability, if you will, on the political party. But I also think that NUP has not acted in that best interest.
But the same day President Museveni came out to say that the National Unity Platform rigged the election.
I also saw a report.
Robert Chagulanyi also came out and said his supporters have to be disciplined. I remember very well.
I also saw
the president aired his own address. He was like, NUP stole the election. They cheated in Buganda and the other regions.
So this is
but
why
Chagulanyi also came out and said, my supporters, you have to be disciplined.
So this is why this conversation, in my view, it really needs to be above the political parties. it should really be about Ugandans and I think how they behave in some circumstances. You can have challenges of corruption, of stealing, you know, within NRM, within FDC. You remember the story of Yokas Hand and others. And there is this story in NUP, you know, where diaspora is accusing the administration of, you know, corruption, of lack of accountability, even within NUP. So you're like, okay, you can remove NRM, have NUP, but have Ugandans changed.
Yes.
So I think there is a need for a very, very clear reflection that is above political parties, that looks into the polity and how to reorganize it. That's why I actually tend to agree with the people who are talking about more of civil consciousness beyond the partisanization of political parties, of religiosity, but looking at all of us as a polity. What makes us Ugandan? And I think the Interreligious Council and those people who are pursuing for a national dialogue process had defined very interesting principles in terms of what makes us Ugandan and what can take this country forward beyond the political parties. And I think that's a conversation that we should have.
Don't you think?
Because, you know, trying to dichotomize problems of Uganda between NUP and NRM, just like it was that binary between FDC and NRM over the years, is where the problem is.
Because that's what the current political sphere dictates.
Not necessarily. This is why, yes, if NUP is saying we are fighting as NUP, it's about NUP, and really the challenge for NUP was also its inability, you know, to galvanize, you know, the political opposition and say we have a common front. For them it was their ideology, we are removing a dictator and we are installing Chagulanyi.
I think I understand what Morrison
and we are installing Chagulanyi. So
getting the conversation
there was no broadened approach. So I think
parties.
we shouldn't push under the carpet the challenges that happen within the political parties or individual Ugandans, you know, who are suffering injustice. That should be called out. And I agree with Rubongoya, if some individuals have disappeared, if they have not been produced in court, it doesn't matter which political party they belong to. The most important thing is that they are Ugandans, and whether you are NRM, you should speak for them, whether you are FDC, you should speak for them, because at the end of the day, if any Ugandan is hurt, it can also come to you.
Morrison Rakakamba, here's why it is so hard to veer away from a conversation that is actually centered around political parties. Why? People are being abducted. A moment you try to veer away and focus on maybe vaccinations and so forth, you hear someone has been abducted, and then you go back to the same conversation. You would actually root for people moving away from such conversations on political parties if you haven't had relatives being abducted. Am I right?
No, just a second. Is the issue, have they been abducted because they are members of political parties, or they have been engaged? You've heard of this thing of military stores.
Government stores, yes.
Have we heard of military stores? You know what insurrection means? Can we have elements claiming, because you see, NUP may have good intentions, by the way, of helping to run a country, but people can use that wave of NUP to engage in criminality. You can organize a peaceful protest, by the way, let me tell you. You go on the streets of Kampala and maybe women's rights or things like that, and some people will come and harness that peaceful protest in order to root.
Rubongoya, are you planning this peaceful protest?
So do we have those situations?
Insurrection? Are you planning an insurrection or simply peaceful protest that will bring about change in this country? And where's the assurance that unscrupulous individuals will not infiltrate these peaceful protests to wreak havoc on Uganda?
It is very painful to listen to my brother Rakakamba on this show. Because, again, that's why I'm saying that every regime like the one we have in Uganda will have spin masters who are very quick to say, let's move on from this conversation and let's create some sense of normalcy.
You can only move away from such a conversation if your relative hasn't been abducted. That's what I've found out from this.
Let's talk about other things. And then they talk about the economy, they talk about what. But the most important thing is we have laws in this country, and we are not addressing that. Regardless of if you are an insurrectionist, whatever, there are rules of the game. Under a democracy, if you are arrested, be produced before a court. Now, Morrison keeps referring to the president's directives on torture and all that. And I'll remind him that this is a man who wrote this, I think, in 2018 or something. But people have been tortured at every other turn. Every time he feels that his power is threatened by any group, the response is of torture, the response is abduction and that kind of thing. In 2018, Honorable Kyagulanyi was arrested in Arua and tortured very, very severely. I was very lucky.
The
I was
time
one
his
of the
driver
people,
was killed.
Yeah, I was one of the people who saw him in that state at Makinde. What did the president come out to say? He condemned torture, said whatever. But did that stop the torture? It has only increased. So, and right now I want to give an example, and I really feel sorry for these young men who get entrapped in this. I've seen the news start coming in that now they are trying to, disband LDU units, beginning with those in Karamoja. But you've seen in every election, there's always, a militia, quote unquote a militia, to help them execute their mission. Immediately after, we had crime preventers at some point, we had Chiboko squad at some point, previously we had Kalangal action plan, and all these. So they always bring these young people, train them, give them guns, do whatever. Immediately after that, you know what happens? They disband them. These people go back into the communities. Some of them end up becoming criminals and that kind of thing. But that is the modus operandi. So we cannot run out from these issues because Morrison knows that what we're living under is a complete dictatorship, which rigged an election and simply wants us to move on from that conversation.
All right, we are going to go to Ivan Walanyolo, who is my reporter, and talk about reconciliation. But before we do that, and when we do return, I want to ask you a question. Is it true that President Museveni never knows of these operations? He just gets caught unaware, like you and me, when he reads the news that someone has been arrested, someone has been killed, Shaban Senyange. We'll be right back with that conversation. But Ivan Walanyolo has this story on reconciliation. Then we shall get back with these two. Very good morning, Ivan Walanyolo. Thank you for that update on reconciliation. I still have David Louis Rubongoya, the Secretary General for the National Unity Platform Party. Also, the founding Chief Executive Officer for the Agency for Transformation, Morrison Rakakamba, is still here, with whom we are still bantering on how best we can get back to normalcy in this beautiful country of ours. Rubongoya, there is a situation simmering within the National Unity Platform Party, and many of the supporters think it might even break the whole party as it is. Sulaiman Chidandala and Muhammad Segirinya tussling it out over documents. How come Sulaiman Chidandala didn't come to the NRM, to the National Unity Platform Party first before going to the press with all these new developments on Muhammad Segirinya's papers?
Well, that's just an internal matter, and I think it's a normal issue that happens every time after elections. You see people petitioning. So the Honorable Muhammad Segirinya ran together with Sulaiman Chidandala, who ran as an independent. And right now, they're in court. And, one says that, the Honorable Segirinya's documents were not proper, they were forged or whatever. And these are issues which court will look into and determine. But what I can say is that for us, when we had a process, as you remember, we had a process for selecting our candidates. Candidates presented their documents. We subjected them to some form of verification. I may not really say that because it's UNEB and the Electoral Commission which are tasked with verification of these documents. And these people became our candidates. And so if there are election petitions, I mean, they are there. Our legal teams are studying the different petitions that have been filed against our candidates. And certainly we'll go to court and defend where we know that we have a
and of course, you're also telling me that Sulaiman Chidandala is no longer a member of the National Unity Platform Party. So it's not NUP attacking NUP.
No, certainly not. Under our constitution, as indeed other constitutions, FDC constitution, NRM and many other constitutions, once you run against the official candidate of the party, you cease to be a member of the party. And those individuals can reapply if they want to become members of the party again. That's what our constitution says.
Of course, on the other issue, before we went to Ivan Walanyolo, I was asking you whether you also believe other individuals within the NRM who say President Museveni never knows of these covert operations, especially what is happening to NUP.
Certainly, I think, when you are... The constitution says that the president is a commander-in-chief. And you cannot tell me that he does not have power to stop these kinds of actions if he decided to. First of all, people have been tortured for so many years. And every time they say, we are going to investigate, nothing ever happens. Like I was saying, the people who tortured Honorable Kyagulanyi, none of them was punished. No report has come out to say, okay, these people were punished. When people were murdered on the streets of Kampala on the 18th and 19th, they said they were going to investigate and come up with a report. Up to now, we've not seen anybody being arraigned before a court of law to be tried for these crimes against humanity. These are not mere discipline cases that they should be handled by structures within the APDF or something like that. No, these are crimes against humanity. You cannot go to the streets and start shooting unarmed people. And of course, so people are tortured every other day, and so it cannot be that the president is not aware of this. In fact, in my view, as a commander-in-chief, the reason why he's a commander-in-chief, he gives directions. So, you know, and that's what, even Idi Amin, every once in a while he would come up and try to, you know, say we do not kill people, we do not do what, but you see what was going on. Obote did the same thing and that kind of thing. So when Morrison keeps referring to a document which he wrote, giving a doctrine and all that, I mean, I can bet you today, if, regardless of what the president has written and whatever, today if these people arrest you and they think you are involved in activities, even if they are lawful activities, but which are meant or which have potential of removing them from power, they will torture you, they will brutalize you, and even if you met with the president and reported, there's nothing that will happen.
And that would be a good point to talk about the peaceful protests. You know very well, there's not a chance anywhere for the security apparatus to let you go ahead with these planned peaceful protests. So what is the way forward after the arrest of Muhammad Segirinya?
And that's what I was saying. I heard Morrison here say that you know, people should have a right to protest peacefully. In this country, there is no place where you can protest peacefully. Especially, I mean, if you came up and you're an NRM group and you wanted to say, Mzee Aveo, you'll certainly be even given police protection and the army will protect you on the streets of Kampala. You'll go and do whatever you want. But if you come up to say, to protest against human rights violations and all that, you'll certainly be arrested.
Rubongoya, is there a chance for reconciliation where the National Unity Platform Party will sit down with the NRM and other parties so that we can come back to normalcy?
We have clearly said that...
besides the protests?
First of all, our protests, we announced them and they are within the law and they are still ongoing. Yesterday you saw the Honorable Muhammad Segirinya and other people in different parts of the country doing protests. Chance for reconciliation, we'll have reconciliation, we'll have dialogue, but we must dialogue as equals. You cannot You cannot have your boot on my neck and then say, let's talk. It's equal people, it's free people who talk.
Morrison Rakakamba, what will it take to, you know, have some normalcy in form of dialogue?
Well, first of all, I think NUP must look at the architecture of the country through the prism of history, even before NUP's existence, if you will. Because remember, when you hear...
Go ahead.
When you hear my brother David Rwonga speaking, he's speaking with good intentions. Good intentions of a political party, you know, that has a platform, you know, whose intention is to actually deliver on certain things that they feel that the current status quo has not delivered on. But make no mistake, I think for the past 6 or so years, there is a certain trend line that aimed to destabilize the gravitas standi or the strength of NRM, which has always been really peace, stability, protecting of people and property. It started with the killing of Muslims. Then bumping off of the late AIGP Kawesi. Then it moved on to, you know, some other Muslim leaders and people being murdered.
Abiriga.
You know, Abiriga and others. To create a state of terror, a state of, you know, removing confidence in the fact that the state of Uganda and the national resistance movement can protect the people. So, those who were plotting those assassinations, those who were plotting that instability, did they just go away because of the wave of people power and NUP? So this is why
actually,
I'm trying to suggest.
NUP is
this
what
is
they
why
accuse of the government.
No, this is why I'm trying to suggest that David Rwongoya and his group of NUP and people power, you know, could be a group of good intentions. And I know Rwongoya very well. I know he cannot, you know, partake into activities that are traverse the stability of the country. He's a man, I've known him for a very long time. Good intentions, who believes in better ideologies and better running of a country. But what I'm trying to tell you is that those groups that were killing Muslims, Kawesi, Abiriga, could have and that's the insurrectionist element, harnessed this movement.
But that is what Robert Chagulanyi
this
accused
movement,
of the government. He
this
said
movement,
it is the government that
just
killed
a second,
Kawesi
just
and
a second,
Abiriga.
to cause trouble. So I think the country needs to look at this. So therefore, where do we move? How do we move forward on this? Elections really ended. They could not have been perhaps perfect, if that is what Rubongoya wanted. They were free and fair. The reason why they say free and fair, it's not because of simplicity or being simplistic. It is that elections all over the world, there are always, you know, some of these challenges that make them imperfect. Perhaps in future, we shall have a perfect election. But what I'm saying,
shall have a perfect election, but this one was not just.
This was free and fair. It was free and fair, not perfect.
Very much for having made the time to speak to Morning at NTV. We've run out
I
of
hope
time.
you will balance your time next time.
We've run out of time. Of course, Rumongoya, thank you very much for having made the time to speak to Morning at NTV. And we do have Stephen Mbide, who is online in Chisenyi to talk about some of the maize dealers in the wake of the, on the ban of Uganda's maize imports. We shall